Nice farm. Real nice. There's something about standing on your own land, working it, knowing that you'll get out of it what you put into it.
Guess the harder you work, the better the crops. That's the way it usually turns out.
Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedman.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim, Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Jewish Museum of the American West, and Atheists United Studios. Hey, Joey. There was a time not so long ago when Westerns dominated the TV landscape. Almost as soon as television sets became widespread, beginning in the late 1940s and into the 1950s, Westerns were among the best represented genres. In 1959 alone, some 30 Western series were aired on primetime television. Hollywood Western movies faded in popularity during the 1960s, but were kept alive on the small screen. Two of these shows, The Rifleman and The Big Valley, were productions of the trio of Levy-Gardner-Laven, a company that deserves a retrospective.
We're delighted to chat with Barbara Laven, a retired trauma therapist and daughter of producer-director Arnold Laven. Barbara, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Jules Levy, Arthur Gardner, and Arnold Laven met during World War II while serving in the 1st Motion Picture Unit for the U.S. Air Force. What are some of your earliest recollections of their company?
I remember them working on The Rifleman at 4-Star Studios. I would go on the set sometimes when my father was directing. I don't always know why I was there, but I have memories more of their being together at parties, like at a party at my family's first nice home. My grandmother had taken me at my parents' request to see Porgy and Bess. After I'd seen the movie, sometime later, there was a party at the house and Sammy Davis Jr. was there. And when I recognized who he was, I marched right up to him and I said, "I hate you." And he asked, he wondered why. And I said, "Because of what you did essentially to Porgy and Bess." And his response to that was, my parents tried to explain that he was an actor. And he said, "Here, let me show you. I can do a lot of," and his response was to make friends with me by taking me into a little hallway between the living room and the dining room and teaching me the time step. And I caught on very quickly. And so he taught me, I think it's called the double time step. I'm not sure. And then so he would say to me, "Okay, let's do the time step." And we did the time step. "Okay, double time step." And we did the double time step. And then I might be making up, it may not be called that, but he'd have me shift between doing the time step and doing the more complicated time step. And then at one point he said, "Okay, triple time step." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just kidding. I'll teach you that later." After that, I just loved him. I thought he was the best thing at the party. I don't know for sure if it sprung out of my dad and mother's interest in the civil rights movement. Jewish families and some Black families, including Nat King Cole Jr., they all decided they were going to move to highly anti-Semitic Hancock Park when they could afford to. And Nat King Cole Jr. went first, but we weren't that far behind because I remember we were all in 3rd Street School, and I remember seeing his kids there. A few years later, when I was around 7 years old, I wanted to join the Bluebirds, which was a different kind of like the Brownies, but they had these little red, white, and blue uniforms, which is why I wanted to join them instead of the Brownies, and high ideals that I had. And I was told that I was put on a waiting list. And then this family moved next door to us, and they weren't Jewish, but they had a daughter my age who immediately was accepted into the Bluebirds. So when that happened, I asked the daughter of the Bluebird troop leader. She was at the same, she was at nursery school with us. I said, why did Mary get to join and I didn't? And she said, because you're a dirty Jew. That's why. And my response was, that's stupid. And you're stupid. And she said, but my mother's not stupid. And she said, you're a dirty Jew. And I said, and your mother is stupid. And I went home after school and I told my parents, and they were pissed. And my father was working, but my mother got very involved with this. And she called the principal of the school, who did nothing, and apparently did worse than nothing. I don't know what it was. And so she decided she was going to call Bluebird headquarters. And she found out that in doing that the head of the Bluebirds was Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, I do not know how my mother called or got in contact with Eleanor Roosevelt, but several nights later, my parents were on the phone, and my mother hands the phone to me and says, "This is," and I knew who they were talking with, but she handed the phone to me and she said, "It's for you." I and I had an awareness of who Eleanor Roosevelt was. I was only 7, but I knew she was a special person and that she had done a lot of good works. And so I was really kind of like, so I said, "Hello," and she said something, again, this is more adaptive than accurate probably, but she said, "Hello, Barbara. This is Eleanor Roosevelt. And I am really sorry that you were put through what you were put through, and I am going to do the best I can to make sure this doesn't happen to any other little girls. And you did the right thing by telling your parents, and your parents did the right thing by calling me." I don't think they directly called her. Uh, and I apparently said, my mother said, they said, when the phone call was over, I apparently, before it was over, I said, "Thank you very much. Call me anytime if you need any help with this," something like that. I'm almost 7 years old. And so, uh, and Eleanor Roosevelt had the principal of the school fired and had that troop disbanded. I don't know anything else that she might have done with the Bluebirds, but I joined the Brownies and went and had a great time and even became a cadet. Didn't go any further than that. But so that's my Eleanor Roosevelt story.
As you mentioned, your father, Arnold Laven, was also a director. I'm familiar with his directing from 2 shows that were staples of my youth, Chips and The A-Team. One of the first films he directed was 1953's Vice Squad. You're sort of in that movie, correct?
Yes, my mother was pregnant with me, and so they hid her behind a desk. I think she played a secretary, something like that. And yeah, so and look, I'm still in still in showbiz. Here I am.
You were also one of the schoolgirls in the 1960 episode of The Rifleman, The Schoolmaster. What do you remember from that experience?
I remember Johnny Crawford went and lassoed absolutely every one of us with his rope. He was pretty good with a rope. And Life magazine came out and wrote an article called something like "Kids Have a Ball at Dad's Work," something like that. And there is a photo of Johnny lassoing my brother's on his kind of hands and knees. Mostly there was a lot, as they say, there's a lot of, hurry up and wait. He just waited around. So the kids, all of us, just kind of goofed around with each other and did what we were told. But we kind of played. Kids will always figure out a way to play when there's nothing else to do, and we did. But we were good kids. We didn't disrupt anything.
Looking back at you in that program, you were a little bit less enthusiastic than some of the other kids. Your face was a little dour. I wonder if that was the hurry up and wait part and you were kind of just over it.
I was a serious kid. And later on, not so serious. But I was a serious child.
The 2 shows most associated with Levy-Gardner-Laven are The Rifleman and The Big Valley. Both shows were notable for using the Western genre to address social issues of that era. This must have been important for your father.
Yes, it was primarily important for my father. I can't speak for Jules or Arthur. My dad seemed to be much more focused on that than they were. Not that they were anti-civil rights or anything, but he was kind of actively always looking for a way to make a statement. And in fact, it was his idea that the Rifleman have a message in every show. It was also his idea that if I'm not mistaken, that the Rifleman have a son. Sam Peckinpah wrote the pilot. I remember him at the house, but I also remember he would often call, and if I answered the phone, he would say he was like he was like an angry wind or an angry tornado or something, and I'd answer the phone and he'd go, "Barbara, get me your dad." And this would happen time after, and finally I would start to say in response, "Hold on, Sam. I'll do that right now." Or I'd just yell something back at him every single time. I'd try and think of something to yell back at him. And when he came to the house, there's all it was Sam and my dad yelling at each other. That's what I remember. And I don't think that's if I remember this correctly, or if I understand this correctly, Sam Peckinpah did not want a son. My dad did want a son in the movie. I don't in the show. I don't know why. That's the impression I have. I could be really wrong about that, but so I'm throwing it out there anyway. And he did not scare me, and I don't know if that bothered him or not. But boy, he really did not let that kind of angry facade down. And when I knew him, I didn't know him. I mean, when he came over to after we moved out of Hancock Park to Encino, I believe he came over a couple of times. He was, and, uh, he just he was obvious. It was obvious to me that he was he was extremely troubled in some kind of way. I'd never seen anybody so consistently this low grade kind of anger. And that's all I really I don't remember him being any other way. I remember him relaxing a little bit once. And his wife, I think, was there with him, and I remember him laughing, once or twice, and the fact that I remember that is because it surprised me. And then he goes and makes these at least I mean, it took me forever to see The Wild Bunch, and there are a lot of his films that I haven't seen, but I was sure I wasn't gonna like I'm not a big Western fan, this violent thing, and I thought it was great. Um, and, um, and I realized he was a real talent, but, man, I the most overtly troubled, well-known person that I ever knew.
The Wild Bunch and how brutal and just sadistic that film was, I don't think anyone else could have made it.
You're probably right. It would have just been almost sadistic. It wasn't, though. If anybody, he had some kind of genius about using violence in a way that made moral sense, which I wasn't expecting.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe. You told us how you learned dancing from Sammy Davis Jr., and it sounds like you were a quick study. I wonder if it might be based on the fact your mother, Wallace Earl Laven, sometimes credited as Amanda Ames or Amanda Harley or even Eileen Harley, was also a professional dancer at both Paramount and MGM studios. That must have been during the golden age of Hollywood musicals.
She was in quite a few films whose names I don't remember, but I could point her out, and I could see there she is really. But she was in, 2 films I can tell you she was in. One was Royal Wedding with Fred Astaire and Jane Powell. She was in the Dance with the Monkey in the Hat, she was one of the background dancers, and I can always see her. And she was also in Singing in the Rain, and for some reason, I don't know why, she got a close-up. There's a moment in that movie where all the dancers stop, and it stops it's kinda like the close-up is kinda like my close-up, so to speak here. She's, like, kinda like this. She's in a yellow fringe flapper dress, and they suddenly stop, and there she is. I was like, and then they move on. She was in Esther Williams movies in the water doing water ballet, and, she was really a really they only hired the best, and she was really good. She wanted to be an actor or an actress, as you called it back then, but, my dad never really gave her many, but she had quite a good part in One Rifleman, but she really just got very bit parts in all his movies, and, and really did not continue. She also got rheumatoid arthritis, which might be another reason she kind of stopped dancing, because she was always hurting after a while, and it was hurting in a way other dancers weren't, and it was a mystery for quite a while, but why it was, and it was rheumatoid. Oh, I can tell you the Bob Hope story when she was a dancer on the Paramount lot, which I think she started. I don't know if she started out there or which direction she went in, MGM Paramount. And she had a car that she wanted to sell. I don't know why. And so she decided she'd sell it by raffling it off. And Bob Hope came along and bought all the raffle tickets. So that gave her the money she needed. And that's really all I know about that story.
I have a Bob Hope story of my own. When I was a youngster, apparently I was making a scene in an airport, just having a tantrum, and Bob Hope walked by with his entourage and pointed out to his friends, "That kid's funny." So I got the Bob Hope seal of approval.
Wow. You must really have been funny. I mean, that's a hard compliment to get. I've got all these different stories. Jerry Lewis, and there was this pediatric dentist that I think a lot of people in showbiz took their kids to. His name was Jerry, I think well, Dr. Bikorsky. Anyway, and I was sitting in the chair one day, and I was upset about I was not a happy camper. And the next thing I knew, Jerry Lewis walks in and sticks 2 cigarettes in his nose and does little things to try and make me happy. Several years later, my parents knew him a little bit, and, I think mostly went to parties of a mutual friend, but anyway, several years later, they bought his 1965 Mustang for my birthday and gave it to me. So that's my 2 Jerry Lewis stories.
You had memorable interactions with a lot of household names during your youth. Do any memories stand out in particular?
Certainly, I guess I'd have to mention 2 icons, one being Michael Jackson and the other being Elvis Presley. Uh, when I was 17 and Michael Jackson was 12, uh, a school, uh, an educationally innovative school opened. It only lasted for a year, and, my parents were convinced by some friends of theirs to send, my brother and I to this school. 4 of the Jackson 5, including Michael, also went to that school for that year, apparently because whatever other school they had gone to, their fans had discovered them, and they had to leave that school. Now, I was 5 years older than him, so it wasn't that we would have a reason to interact a lot, except that we were all so bunched together all the time that everybody interacted with everybody, and one of the things that I remember when I wasn't just busy with friends my own age is he was a tease. He would tease everybody, including me. Now, the reason my relationship with him was a little more than with most of the other kids is because the school decided to put on a musical, and, um, and they put on Guys and Dolls, and my mother choreographed it, and the 4 of the Jackson 5, Jackie Jackson was too old for high school, thus he wasn't there, and the girls were too young. So it was Michael, Marlon, Tito, and Jermaine. And they all were not my background dancers, because I was Sarah the Salvation Army lady, and I didn't have any background dancers, but they were the background dancers in the the background dancer in this school play. And my mother choreographed it, and Michael he became absolutely infatuated with my mother. And it was amazing to be able to watch them perform. They were wonderful. They were really, obviously, incredibly talented kids. The trade-off for their being in the play was nobody was allowed to film it or tape it or whatever it was that we did back in the '70s, whatever the technology was. So I don't think there's any recording of the play, but, between my mother's choreography and their talent, it wasn't bad. It was pretty good. Pretty good production. I guess the other icon is Elvis Presley, and, Levy-Gardner-Laven made a really bad Elvis Presley movie called Clam Bake, and, for part of that movie, everybody's family went to Florida to where they were shooting the Orange Bowl Regatta, which probably doesn't exist anymore. I haven't heard about it lately, but I think Elvis was playing a racer in the Orange Bowl Regatta. This is what I remember about Elvis. First of all, he was a really nice guy. He introduced himself to everybody. If he happened to run into you there were so many people on the set, I don't think he was going out of his way, but if you end up next to him, he'd say, he said, "Hi, I'm Elvis." Now, I was a fan of the Beatles, and I did not appreciate Elvis in those days, but I didn't want him to know that, and I just said, "I'm really glad to meet you," or something, and he asked me I was holding a book because on a set, there's just it's very boring on a set. There's a lot of hurry up and wait, like I said earlier, so I brought a book with me. I was reading the book Rebecca, and, by Daphne du Maurier, and it had been made into a movie, and he asked me what book I was reading, and I said Rebecca, and he said I'd seen the movie, and he actually named Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh, and he said it was a really good movie. And I said, "Yeah, I thought it was a good movie too." And I said, "I thought you were really good in King Creole." And, he said I think he said to me that that was the favorite movie he was in. I don't know if I've made that up or not, but I think he said that to me. And then I said, "I also liked you in Kissin' Cousins." I was really little when I saw that. I said, "You were really good in King Creole, and, you're not just a great musician, you're a great actor." I said that to him, like, I'm, like, 12 years old. We were having somebody's birthday party on the set, and we were all sitting at this very long table. I don't remember whose birthday it was, but Elvis comes in with the birthday cake and dumps it on top of the director's head on purpose, and he thinks it's really funny, and I don't know if anybody else I remember people laughing, who wouldn't laugh? I thought it was weird, but, and then there was some discussion about whether or not he and his other musicians who were also there, were going to perform for the cast and crew. And this is I'm kind of in the background listening to all this. And the casting and there was talk about the Colonel did not want him to perform. Now, the Colonel was on the set, and my memory of him, and I had this memory before Tom Hanks made him the scary guy that he really was that he was a scary guy, and he kind of hovered in a corner, and he kind of wouldn't come out and socialize with anybody, but he was back there. And, and somebody had said something like the Colonel doesn't want him to play, and I said to Elvis, I said, "Oh, please play, please play, please play." And I don't know if I was the only kid who said that, but I just remember that I was, but I probably wasn't, because he played. He said, "Okay," and he went and he played. And I remember I really enjoyed his playing, even though I wasn't an Elvis fan. It's hard to not enjoy real talent because I appreciated him much more now than I did back then. I'm not a big fan, I don't listen to his music all the time or anything, but I can see he was incredibly talented. And what a waste, really, all these stupid movies he was in.
How did your father want to be remembered?
I don't know how he would want to be remembered, but I know how he is remembered. Um, First of all, I don't think he was a great director. I think he was a good director. He was a director who wanted to do better movies than he could do because he was always outvoted by his other two partners. They always had to agree on what would be done. They always split everything they earned, they always split evenly in thirds. And he had regrets about that. Um, but he was also a difficult director. But as a human being, he was a real mensch. He was kind, he was generous. He my mother and he were the kind of people that people wanted when he wasn't directing anyway, that they wanted to hang around. So people were coming to the house all the time. When my father died, I got more people calling me and crying, everyone from Gregory Peck to the gardener. Now, I don't know why Gregory Peck called and cried because I don't know they didn't do anything together. But Gregory Peck cried. So, they were really good people. Um, I mean, also my father was a highly intelligent human being. He was a top bridge and poker player. He could take any argument somebody presented and kind of like Socrates, tear it apart and see what the other person hadn't seen. Uh, I think he would have made a great trial lawyer, actually. One of the best people I have personally ever known was my dad, and my mother too. And so that's how I think most people remember him.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Barbara.
Well, thank you for listening. I enjoyed this.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.